I think even to that point about, how do you balance sort of certainty and being careful along with efficiency, right? And I think that's a trade-off when it comes to insurance that folks are talking about all the time. And so, some of our customers before they worked with SILNA said, we're going to figure out our most strict payer when it comes to authorizations. And then we are just going to follow that process across the board. Because if we follow that process, we'll have the highest acceptance rate. And that is great because you want to be really careful. But you can also imagine for 80% of your payers, you don't actually need to go that far on the authorization process, but it is not worth it to take that risk. And all of a sudden you have one patient who has denied care and it drives negative patient outcomes or financial outcomes. And so you want to have that confidence that you're doing as much as you need to know that it's going to be approved, but you don't really need to go beyond that. And so one thing that we're rolling out here too, which is quite cool, is you can actually upload here soon into SILNA every denial letter you've ever gotten from an authorization, and then it'll analyze it and it'll tell you the main reason and the main payers that are denying authorizations and why. And then it'll actually come up with its own suggestion and say, hey, moving forward, do you want to push this rule into the system, right? And to your point, no one may want to do this, but you have to do it. And it's the smallest thing. Like some payers accept signatures from a nurse or an RN and other ones don't, right? Some people, when you're uploading a treatment plan or supporting documentation, you have this certification period or, essentially validity period for what you're requesting, but it doesn't actually fall within the authorization timeline. And so it's just all these small things that you could get right, but you probably need to triple check and almost have one person do the auth and a second person review the auth. And, at that point, your focus is shifting from where it really should be, which is what does this patient need? How do we drive the best outcome possible?
Yeah. And when you're looking at your own time as an owner, when you're looking at your staff's time as clinicians, you're looking at billable hours, you're looking at those non-billable hours for your staff, like you're looking at the amount of hours in a workday, and then knowing that, also your staff's probably working outside of their workday. And most owners are trying to figure out, how can I make things more efficient? How can I minimize this? Like we're working with a company right now who they're trying to figure out how to get their staff like on the ground, like on the floor, like interacting in a session to help support the techs. As just like an extra bonus thing that they're doing that they're not able to bill for, but they just want that interaction, that connection and that support. But right now they can't figure out how to get that going feasibly because I can't remember how many hours a week their BCBAs were just working on like
administrative burden.
And a lot of that is like the tedious stuff that, even though they're spending when I was in the conversation, I wanted to bring this up, but I just kept my mouth quiet, but I wanted to be like, and what's the accuracy on that after all those hours spent? Making sure that things are being done right. Like, are they being done right? Or how many mistakes are still coming out of that and time wasted? And so we were talking to Jeff before we pressed record on the podcast because we're big fans of SILNA. We're, if you've talked to us, it's no surprise, right? Me saying this right now. But it truly is because of, I've said this before, but the people behind SILNA, like you guys, are such amazing people and so great to work with. But I'm excited, what you guys are doing here. Like the more I'm learning today, cause I know there was like this new thing that we were going to talk about, the predictive document intelligence. And I was really excited about it. And I refrained from asking a lot of questions so that we could talk about it on the podcast. But it seems unreal. Like, I know that's where we are with the age of AI and being able to learn how to integrate all of this stuff, but it seems like magical.
It feels magical. Yeah.
I mean, really, if I were still in practice right now, I would be like, sign me up. I don't care how much this costs. Like, I want this thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think when we started SILNA a few years back, we sat down and there's this whole, brand logo wheel that you can put together that says, as a company, what brand do you care about? And what we identified, and this was 3 years ago, and hopefully it's coming to fruition, is we wanted to be a blend between the magician and the innocent hero. So it's kind of similar to if Ted Lasso was a magician. So it's you're the innocent hero. You're trying to fight for what you think is right, and at the same time you say, how do they do it? And if we talked a year ago, I think the big question from everyone is, okay, how much of this AI stuff is real? What's possible here? And now I think everyone knows, okay, it is real, but how do we think about ROI? How does this actually drive impact to our business? And, one framework I've been talking about folks with recently is, I think so many times when people think about AI, they say, how do we do what we've done previously, just more efficiently? And I think that's actually the wrong question, right? It is because of this magic that is happening behind the scenes. How can we do things that we've never done before, right? And so how do you start to think about these functions within an ABA practice and say, we shouldn't do this because we've always done it that way. We should be willing to change this and think about, how do we know before we submit an auth if it's going to be approved? How do we know if a patient or family member has recently gained or lost insurance that we didn't know about? All these, how do we make it easier for clinicians to take documentation? Across the board, you're seeing this impact, and it's already so hard for an ABA provider to say, okay, how do I retain clinical staff? How do I get new clinical staff? How do I make sure that they're actually unlocked to just focus on what really they should be doing, which is, maximizing their schedule and seeing patients. And so it's a really exciting time. I think everyone's trying to figure out, where's the magic reel? Where's the magic smoke and mirrors? And, it's a fun journey to be on.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to one thing you said, right? Like, and this is something that we've told people to do on session notes and on treatment plans. Like, okay, take the worst payer, right? And follow their guides, and then you don't have to mess with it. You don't have to be like, well, what do we do for this one? What do we do for that one? And it does help streamline things. But just thinking about it now, like the downstream effect of this, right? Like, if you're having to treat to make sure that your treatment plan has the right number of goals per hour of clinical service, and you could cut this on a child by 20%, but the only reason you're doing it is because if I don't follow this, it's going to get denied. Like, the amount of again, administrative burden, right, of like coming up with silly little goals that just to beat the system, where you could focus more on care and working on the things that matter. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I mean, that's kind of a big deal. So
yeah, I think the SILNA brand and website, if you go to it, is the theme is it's a sunrise, right? So that's our logo is a sunrise. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you can kind of see this sun rising. And I very much so think that there's a sentiment going around right now that healthcare in the U.S. can be broken, but you go back a few decades ago, and that sentiment was not true, and people weren't saying it. I think their care was not as complex as it is today. There weren't as many paths of care, and wasn't as much research going on. And you fast forward to today, and it's become more of a reactive state. And because of that, it's become this drag coefficient on the system of administrative tasks to say, how do I keep my practice running? And so the inspiration of SILNA, we've talked about this before, but I've had family members in the healthcare space, and I got to see clinician burnout, firsthand. And I want to get back to that sunrise where people aren't burnt out and you just have confidence in what you're doing. And I think if you go and talk to most providers in the space, the thing that's kind of like sucking the joy away and maybe making their day-to-day operations not as enjoyable is typically the stuff they don't want to do, but they have to do. Right. And so how do you start to remove that and abstract it away so you can actually just get back to enjoying building your practice, serving more kids, whatever that might be.